G'day peeps and welcome back to another episode of What the Fact Friday. Today's fact is you should only eat 1 egg yolk to 3 egg whites when you're having an egg meal. Otherwise you may suffer some sort of cardiovascular disease. Well, I've got a whole stack of notes here to talk about all that, and if you want any of the reference papers that I'm referring to today, please send me a DM, and what I'll do is I'll send you through the list so you've got it so you can look up the references yourself and you can have a bit of a read. So I'm going to debunk this a little bit because over the years there's been a lot of controversy regarding about how many eggs you should eat and what people are saying, no, we shouldn't eat more than 1 or 2 eggs a day, or we should eat, just the egg yolk and all the egg whites, etc. So let's delve into it. Firstly, let's look at an egg. And a 60-gram egg, a large egg, usually has got around about 74 kilocalories of energy. It's got 7 grams of protein, 5 grams of total fat, or 1 gram of saturated fat. Very important point. But some of the stuff that also dug up here is that in the egg, in the color of the yolk itself, it's got pigmentation in it that might benefit eye health as well. There's also folic acid, vitamin B12 and iron, and more importantly, there are 13 essential vitamins that the body requires that are found in eggs. So a little egg is a real power pack of nutrients in there. So it concerns me when we say that, hey, we shouldn't have them. We should sort of stay away from them and not eat them right. So let's look at cholesterol, right? And I'm going to go make it as simplistic as possible so we can understand this in the context of what I'm talking about. And it's when you go get your blood test done. So the doctor will tell you that your LDL or HDL levels are good, bad, whatever. And I'll compare the ratios of LDL to HDL because that's really important. Now, remember this, HDL, H, happy, that's the good stuff, right? HDL, good. LDL, the bad stuff, right? When we compare the two ratios, that ratio is really important in determining any cardiovascular disease or atherosclerosis, etc. So when we get the blood test done, you always find that they've got that ratio in there for you as well. Now, when we look at about how many eggs we should be eating, and this is the interesting thing, when we look at the Australian information, and I went to the Australian Heart Foundation on this, what they recommend is if you're a healthy individual, now listen to this, if you're a healthy individual, you can eat as many eggs as you want. There is no limit whatsoever. Now, that is from the Australian Heart Foundation. That's an accredited foundation. So that was very interesting to hear. So all you people that have been throwing out your egg yolks, maybe not a good idea. What they do say, though, is that if you're predisposed to some sort of cardiovascular disease or you've been diagnosed with something along those lines, then they recommend that you only eat 7 eggs or less per week. So here's the interesting thing. Even though you have been diagnosed with a cardiovascular disease, you're still being told you can eat eggs. So I want you to think about that because that's going to play a vital role in what I have to say later on. Now, a lot of the studies that I've got here, I've got the information. There's a lot to read, so bear with me for a while I read the stuff out. But there was a study done by Blesso. He did a very large-scale epidemiological study and found a very, very association between the intake of eggs and cardiovascular disease. What he found was that 67% of the populace showed only a small increase in any form of LDL or HDL levels, even no matter how many eggs they ate. So, whether it be 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, where that was never discussed, but he was looking at the populace and looking if they had eggs, what did it actually do? What he did find, though, which was really important, is that the HDL, the good stuff, and the LDL, the bad stuff, it rose evenly. So when we compared the ratios of LDL to HDL, which is your marker to see, if you're going to be healthy, unhealthy, cardiovascular disease or not, that ratio remained exactly the same. So that's something to really, really focus on. Now, in the Cochrane database, that's the stuff that we get from uni to look at statistics, etc., they found that increasing the omega-3, the fat that's in the actual egg, the good fat, had little or no effect on cardiovascular disease within the body itself. It didn't affect adiposity, so the storing of fat. It didn't affect blood pressure. And the only thing that it did was that they found that it may reduce, now listen to this, reduce triglycerides in the body. So there you go. We're starting to find that there's actually some benefits from having eggs in the body itself. Now, another guy called Lesmos looked at a very, very interesting study. He had people eating 3 eggs per day over a 13-week period, but they were a group of young, healthy individuals, and there was 30 of them. Now, what he did was he went that little bit further, because now we understand there's a more research regarding the effectiveness of, let's say, lipoproteins, how they work in the body, and we can break them down into smaller particles. So he went in to look at what's it called here, let's say apolipoproteins. So he looked at ApoA and ApoB, and to see if they had any effect at all on the body itself. So what was interesting here, let me just find this information. Again, the same thing, he found that the change in LDL and HDL levels was the same, that it just rose slightly so that the ratio remained the same. So there was no issues there whatsoever. But what was interesting is he found that the ApoA, which is the major component of HDL, the good stuff, there was hardly any change. And the ApoB, which is the carrier of LDL, had a very, very small change as well. So that sort of leads on to the fact that it explains why LDL and HDL ratios were still the same. So again, the same thing, eating plenty of eggs. We've got a long study that was done for a fair while, healthy individuals eating a fair few eggs, and everything was fine again. Fuller, another guy, he exampled the effects on high consumption of eggs with people with type 2 diabetes. So now we've got people that have got a metabolic disease that's come across from, let's say, overeating, having excess fat, etc., non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, etc. And what he did was, and here's the interesting thing, he had 140 people over a 3-month randomized controlled trial. And what he did was he didn't recommend or stop the amount of eggs that they were eating. And he found that having as many eggs as you wanted didn't cause any issues at all to these people with the LDL and HDL levels. And in the context of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acid consumption, it was not an issue at all. So this is now a little bit of a tricky topic, because there's some papers that actually show that if you are a type 2 diabetic and you're eating eggs, it actually may cause an issue. And I'm going to show you the context of this, because I've done a fair bit of reading on this, especially as a diabetes educator, and I've got my own perception of this. There's another guy called Richard who did a systematic review, so looked at everything else as well. And the same thing again, he looked at the correlation between egg consumption and cardiovascular disease in individuals with type 2 diabetes, and again, he found there was inconsistent results. So in some of the people, it didn't make a problem. In some of the people, it did. And I think I've worked out in my mind what I think that is, and I'll talk about it. And here's the interesting thing. The Canadian Journal of Cardiology published a paper that said that anyone that's high risk of cardiovascular disease should avoid eggs completely, or anything that has high levels of cholesterol. So there you have it, guys. Basically what we've been told here is that you can eat as many eggs as you want. No problems at all, as long as you're a healthy individual. Now, going back to some of the other stuff where we said that, hey, let's watch out on how many eggs you're going to eat and the reasons why if you're unhealthy. If you look at your whole diet, forget the eggs, look at your whole diet, and you're eating a lot of saturated fat and then you're eating more eggs on top, you're just increasing that intake. So what you need to do is look at your whole diet and go, right, how much fat have I eaten? How much room have I got to go? Can I eat eggs in there at all? If you're eating, let's say, white fish, and you're not eating much protein at all, and you're having, 6, 8, 10, 12 eggs a day, from what we see here, it's not going to be a problem, because even though your LDL will go up, the bad cholesterol, the good cholesterol comes up as well, and the ratios are still the same. And this is one discussion I had with a group of vegans a while ago when they were talking about, consuming red meat as compared to plant-based stuff. I basically made it clear, I go, if you're going to eat fat, you're going to see fat in your bloodstream, right? And it's the same with eggs. You're eating eggs that have got fat, you're going to see fat in your bloodstream. So the most important thing is this. Let's have a look at the take-home messages. One, balance out your whole daily diet or your weekly diet based on what you want to eat. And then if you want to eat eggs, make sure you're allowed for that. So that comes with your protein, that comes with your fat. So you balance all of that. That's number one. Number two, you can eat as many eggs as you like if you're a healthy individual. So if you've got no issues with any form of cardiovascular disease, you're active, your body shape, you look like you're lean, you go to the gym, you're doing whatever, you're active in lifestyle itself, you're eating a good, well-balanced diet, guess what? Having 3, 4, 6, 8, 10 eggs is not an issue. It's not an issue as long as you balance it out in your diet. But the most important thing, if you are prone to cardiovascular disease, let's say it's a genetic disposition, or You've been to the doctor and they've told you, hey, listen, your last 20, 30, 40 years, you've abused your body and you've actually caused the problem. And now you should be controlling your total cholesterol intake. Then you need to think about, how many eggs should I eat? And that's the interesting point. Then maybe have the 1 egg yolk to 3 egg whites. So you can see it's not a simple answer as, hey, this is the golden rule for eggs. It's not. There's 2 different rules, and it depends on you as the individual, how healthy you are. As for me, funny enough, the other day, because I was looking up researching eggs, I wanted eggs. I cooked up 6 eggs in an omelette and had that with all the vegetables and everything else that go with it. So still had a very high fiber content with my food. Not a problem at all. And I get my blood test done and, my LDL and HDL are actually quite good. And I eat a lot of red meat, etc. So food for thought. Remember, everybody's different. Just because I'm like that doesn't mean you're like that. But what the take-home message here today is, yes, you can eat as many eggs as you like as long as you're a healthy individual. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to go to www.n90.com.au, sign up, get yourself on track, follow my eating plan and get the ball rolling. Thank you.